Welcome back. ZAZA Uptown aims to give a platform to Black Caribbean women through photo, video, film, writing, and more through curation, direction, publishing, and visual documentation. Joining us now to discuss are co-curators of ZAZA, Zainab Floyd and Angelica Calderon. Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Of course. So the first thing I want us to start with, of course, is for people who are not familiar with ZAZA Uptown. Can you give us a little background on ZAZA and your mission?
Yeah, so ZAZA Uptown was founded by me and Zainab as of last year. Our purpose of ZAZA Uptown is to dedicate the progression of Black women, femmes, and non-binary folks, creatives, through curation and archiving the history, both past and present.
Thank you for that, Angelica. And Zainab, you are also the founder of the Caribbean Archive. Can you tell us about your work with that as well?
Yes, so Caribbean Archive, I began Caribbean Archive last year. Its sole purpose was to hold a space for education, to highlight narratives of Black Caribbean femmes and women who are creating a scholarship of work. So we're anthropologists, dancers, writers, poets, and world makers.
As we know, there are plenty of Caribbean Black filmmakers and creators around the city, everywhere, but we don't have a lot of spaces where we can see that work. So thank you for creating that, both of you, really. I wanted to talk about just the importance of celebrating, uplifting, and empowering women and femmes that create this work through your pages, through your platforms.
I think that there is definitely a space to be had for Black Caribbean femmes and gender nonconforming individuals to have a collective space where people can just look at individuals who are creating work outside and on the island.
Yeah. And also, just the deep-rooted historical erasure of Black Caribbean identity, and then tying that to womanhood, and just like the selfhood of women and gender expansive folks, is still ongoing today. So we wanted to root back to our identity because we've had trouble finding that within an academic space. And that's the sole reason why we wanted to expand that space on a digital platform, because it provides accessibility, but also a connection for those that want to find that place for them, and also for us to find people that feel the same way.
Thank you for that. And I wanted to bring up, speaking of identity, Angelica, you're of Dominican descent, and Zainab, you're of Haitian descent, and you kind of came together to curate ZAZA. Can we talk about just the fact that, racism and colorism in modern day Hispaniola, I feel like we're neighbors on the island, but not a lot of people feel the same way. So can we just discuss like the challenges that we also face there with colorism and racism on the country?
I think that the conversations that are based on colorism, texturism, featureism, and racism in general are not necessarily conversations that are had. There's definitely a lot of hesitation because of trauma and the triggers that it brings, and the fact that I've met Angelica. We met through the Studio Museum in Harlem when we were teenagers, and we automatically connected, and it was a kind of sister bond that we could not bring words to. And I think that it just shows even more the importance of ZAZA Uptown.
I feel like, especially like being in the pandemic, there comes a point where we don't want to re-traumatize ourselves. We don't want to have a debate with someone who, we don't want to have a debate on why we shouldn't be oppressed. Like, we know that this has been an ongoing battle within the Latinx, the Caribbean community. There comes a point where, the whole point of ZAZA, we're trying to give, ZAZA is literally a mirror of the people that you choose, that you think are not visibly Caribbean or not visibly Latinx. It's we want to pick and choose our battles when it comes to that. We know it exists. It's just when it comes repetitive, it's you decide when you're ready to admit that Black people exist. Blackness is global. So we know our audience, and we know that we want to express joy, and root back and liberate our Blackness on our platform.
Yes.
Another day.
I think you're both doing that beautifully. And I want to just highlight a clip that you shared by Numa Perrier, Florida Water. I would not have known about this filmmaker. She's a Haitian filmmaker, if it weren't for ZAZA. So thank you for sharing that. It was a clip that displayed the resilience and almost the serenity, if you will, in Haiti following the 2010 earthquake. So, I appreciated seeing that. And I thank you both for sharing the work of a femme filmmaker from Haiti in that way. And I hope that this can also aid in the conversations that we lack in our communities. Going to this platform and seeing these pieces being shared may help aid in that conversation, I hope. I wanted to also ask what the themes are that are represented in some of the works you share. What can someone expect from seeing the post on ZAZA and as well as the Caribbean Archive feed?
I think that one of the things that we also try to make extremely important is to make individuals feel affirmed. Like, wow, I see myself in this, and I did not know this was happening within the Caribbean and outside of the Caribbean, particularly the Bronx and Mount Vernon and other areas of New York in general. And I feel that it makes people feel good. It makes you feel affirmed. And even the language that we use to describe what artists are doing, it's digestible and it's easy to access. And I think that that's a recurring theme that I try to do with Caribbean Archive and we try to do with ZAZA Uptown.
Yeah, there's definitely a collective joy that Zainab and I, like just the two of us, like creating ZAZA, like the reason why ZAZA was created was joy, and continuing that joy, because ancestral trauma exists, but also ancestral joy. And we really wanted ZAZA to be that place digitally. So, and like discovering the Black Caribbean artists that we have, and also like bringing our friends to our platform to dedicate the progression of them, there's definitely collective like navigation and exploration of our selfhood. So that just like, which continues like dismantling these systems because we're creating and producing. So there's definitely a sense of community through that platform.
And if you can also speak to us about the lack of representation of Afro-Caribbean women in media, particularly in Latinx novelas and film, movies and stuff like that, in front of and behind the camera. Although the women exist that are doing this work, the representation is seldom there. If you can speak on that.
Mm-hmm. Like going back to community, like some examples I could think of is, the whole Emmy situation, like some, non-Black Latinx actors saying like, why aren't there like Latinx representation? But Jerome is literally standing right there. Like, it's like there's that pick and choose of which Latinx person, which Caribbean person do you actually want to win? Like who, there's a lot of, I think it's very much like behind the scenes, because although like Jerome is there, MJ Rodriguez is there, it's like there's still like an ignore from, like the ones who are behind, the ones who are like hidden because they have the power. So I think there's, and like just thinking about like novelas in general, like most of like the novelas I used to watch when I was younger, like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't watched any in a while, but I've never seen a novela that was like set in like Puerto Rico, like, or like Haiti. Like it's usually like, it's not in the Caribbean islands, and makes sense of like the high demographic, like the percentage is Black Caribbean people that take up those spaces, so that live in those spaces. So it's just definitely like an ongoing conversation of, like our identity, like questioning and reflecting like Latinidad, and even like Latinidad is still like a question that's within like Caribbean identity, like just questioning ourselves and like reflecting like the negative isms that are put on to why it's so hard to see a Black person being a protagonist in a Spanish speaking show. So.
And I agree wholeheartedly with Angelica said.
Thank you. One last thing before we go. I wish we had more time to just like discuss everything and like delve into the topics that you're so lovingly sharing with us. And you know, these discussions need to continuously happen. And like you said, Angelica, there hasn't been novelas in different places like that. I've just seen like Mexico. When we were growing up, we had Carita de Ángel and one like Black actor as a child. So we didn't have a lot of representation back in the day or now either. So I hope that changes now with all the narratives that are going around with people talking about inclusivity. And like, before we go, do you think that's even like genuine, or has it happened? Like, is it a moment for people, or is it a movement for representation and diversity and inclusion to happen in these places?
I mean, going back to the behind the scenes stuff, like there's you know, like there's quite a few shows that have like a Black protagonist, but it's like the way that they're written is like not genuine. It's very much stuck in the past. And you know, like although there is a Black protagonist, which is like beautiful, but it's like there's a continuation of re-traumatizing the protagonist also. So it's like there needs to come a point where it's not written that you're traumatizing a protagonist in order to like gain profit. Like that protagonist deserves joy, because that deserves to be seen. And you know, there's you know, we don't, especially like as a viewer, like I don't need to be taught that. I don't need to be retaught trauma all the time if we're experiencing it, you know, because then you question like who's your audience in the first place. So it's definitely possible, but you know, like it's definitely a question of like power. And when it comes to power, you have to dismantle racism, colorism, you know, texturism and featureism, as Zainab said prior.
And what are your hopes with ZAZA and the Caribbean Archive? What's coming up for you both, and how can people stay in touch and follow the pages as well? And let's say there's a creative that wants to submit their work, how can they do that?
We are really excited for the projects that we have in mind. We are working on a zine, but also the pandemic has also put a pause on a lot of the work that we want to produce. But we mostly reach out to the individuals on our following, but we are also open to submissions. Yeah, we have a lot of stuff in store for ZAZA.
Yeah, if you want to reach out, you could email to us at zazaartcollective@gmail.com. You could follow Zainab and her offspring, the Caribbean Archive. It's at Caribbean Archive on Instagram. And you could follow Zainab and I, me and Zainab's project, ZAZA Uptown, at ZAZA_Uptown on IG. And we're also on Facebook. And we have a Spotify if you want to listen to some tunes, because we got that too. But yeah, that's where we're at. Do you also want us to tell us our like personal IG accounts, or?
Yeah, if you want, we can add that in as well.
Okay. So you could follow me at wayward_Cal, CAL.
I guess you can follow me at That Girl Luna. Yeah, we work on a lot of individual projects as well. Me and Angelica are practicing artists based in Mount Vernon and the Bronx. And we focus our work on the narratives of Black, Caribbean, femmes, GNC individuals.
Right. Thank you both again so much for making the time to join us and talk to us about ZAZA Uptown and the Caribbean Archive. I really, really love the pages. And I feel like this 10-minute interview wasn't enough to brush on and show and display all the beauty and joy that you've shown on these pages. So thank you. And I hope to invite our viewers to check them out.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Again, folks, to see work by Black Caribbean women and femme, please follow at ZAZA_Uptown and at Caribbean Archive on Instagram. We'll be right back.